for sleeping pills.
It would help if I hit the right button. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to class today. Thank you for joining me, whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording. I appreciate you watching. Thank you for joining me today. We are going to talk about arrays today. I don't know how long we're going to talk about them. Probably a relatively short amount of time today. I just kind of want to do a few demonstrations to extend a little bit on the stuff that you all saw last week. Last week in the video, we covered things like push and pop and a lot of different things having to do with arrays. And I just wanted to reiterate some points there, do a few things with some code just so we can see another view of how it all works. So I've got a website here. I'm just going to basically demonstrate some stuff in JavaScript, dealing with our JavaScript arrays, and maybe going back a little bit and reviewing a little bit of the concepts that we've sort of studied previously. So I'm going to be working in my JS file primarily today. And so let's start out by creating ourselves an element. I'm going to create an element here using a function. So let's use a arrow notation function here to define a function called createBase. So let's create base, and we're going to create just a base element for our object here, or for our website here. So we are going to let's create a constant called m, and that will be document.createElement main. We'll create a main element on our page. And let's just go ahead and say document.append child M, and then let's do a little bit of styling there. So document dot m dot style dot background color equals let's go light blue. Right, or let's actually use a hex value for a light blue here. Or maybe even an HSL value for a light blue. So something like a, let's see, that would be 0 to 90 to 180. Let's say something like a 180, comma, saturation is going to be 100%. Lightness is going to be at, say, 85%. All right, let's try that out. Since we did that in a function, we either need to add a DOM content loaded event listener for it, or we need to actually execute and call the function. So I'm going to add an event listener for it. So document.add event listener. We're going to DOM content loaded. We're going to run the create base function. All right, so when we save that, we run our site here now. Let's see, is this working? What did I miss? I missed a little something. I'm doing demo just kind of off the top of my head today. So let's just check and see what we might have missed here. Ah, okay. Yeah. Shouldn't be on document. Document dot body dot append child node, right? Let's see. Are we working here? We're not. What am I forgetting? I am certainly forgetting something. Let's see here. Document dot append. Yeah, let's try that. Shoot. Oh, what am I forgetting? This is one of those situations where you're trying to do things on the fly and you forget. So I'm doing my create element. I'm doing that properly. Actually, this is just and it's not document.m because I've already defined that as document. So document dot body dot append. We could probably even make this more specific by saying document dot query select body. There. That looks better. Is it better though? Not really. What am I forgetting? Oh goodness, this is not a good way to get started today. So let's just get rid of things a line at a time until we can figure it out. Okay, we get rid of that. um, actually, uh, let's do document dot good element. Um, hmm. What am I forgetting? I know I'm forgetting something. It should just be document.body.append child, the way that we had it. But for whatever reason, doesn't seem to want to work. Could be. We take it out of the function. Let's take it out of it and just let it. Wanting to be. Oh, wait. Now it is. Now it is. Now it's there. I believe. Yes, it is. So that much is working. So let's bring this back. You know, sometimes you got to break things down and bring it back just so you can remember what you're doing. So is this there? Yep, it's there. And so if I say m dot style dot background color. Oh my goodness, I just realized what was wrong. That's silly. HSL 180 100 85. M dot style dot height equals, let's say, 20 viewport height. I was forgetting the height. So when we add the height, we see our color here. There's our light blue. It all works the way that we thought it would work. I was forgetting the height. Something very, very simple. Let's make that just a little bit darker. just so we can see it a little bit better. Here's our cyan, our light blue, the color that we were going for. So now we have our color loaded. And so this bit of JavaScript here is just creating that that main section there. And so we can add more to it. We can take away from it. We can do things in CSS with it, right? In general, which is why I don't forget that, which is why I forgot that. Here, I would go over to my style.css, add some styling for main, and enter like a min height of 20 VH, which would probably be a better way to do it than to do it here anyway. Right, so it's one of those things where I try to get a little fancy with it and forget what I'm doing. Okay, so there we go. And so what I'd like to be able to do in there is I'd like to be able to add a bit of a list. And we can do that with arrays. And there are a lot of different ways that we could do that with arrays. Right, for example, one of the big things that we could do is we could say, well, maybe I want a bunch of H1s here. So with this, right, we can start to create an array. Let's create an array. In fact, let's create another function. We'll create another function called let create headings. And we'll set that equal to our arrow notation function. And we can create an array. So we can create a const array of headings. So we'll call that our headings. And we will set that equal to an empty array. So inside of here, we'll put heading 1, another heading, and heading 3. Right, so one of the things that we discussed in last week's video is the fact that basically an array is like a container of containers, right? So if we say a variable is a container with a piece of data in it, an array is a container of containers of data, right? So we can kind of look at it that sort of way. Right, so if I break this down, I have one big container with 3 little containers, each with a piece of data. And so now what I want to do here is I want to be able to iterate over this array and add these headings to my document. And so I think one of the things that we looked at last week, if I remember correctly, is the idea of a for, in JavaScript, it would be a for in loop. So I can say for heading in our heading, right? And the colon here being, or actually, am I doing another programming language? Yes, I think I am. For heading of heading. I was doing Java there for a minute. So for heading of heading. So what that's going to do is that's going to iterate through my R headings array and grab everything out of the array. And then with that, we can add things to other things. Now, we can add them all to our main element. We just have to remember to call our event listeners in order here. So we can say something like document dot query selector main dot enter HTML plus equals h1 concatenate heading concatenate slash h1. Right, so it's going to go through my array headings array here. So for each path through the for loop, it's going to do one of each of these. Heading 1, another heading, or heading 3, and create an inner HTML of h1 with the text in it that will be plus equal, so it will be appended to main. And so since main is not created until here, we do need to make sure that we call our event listeners in the right way, right? So we need to make sure that our create base function is called first, and then we can document.add event listener, DOM content loaded, and our create headings. And so when we do that, we see our headings show up on our page. Right, and so one of the big things about this, or one of the big reasons why we would want to do this, is for us using an API. Right, so in the next module, we'll be kind of looking at APIs and how we can get data from APIs, or specifically JSON files, right, which is basically just how APIs come to us. And then so if we're getting data from other sources, we want to be able to iterate through that, and we iterate through that in a very similar way that we iterate through arrays. Right, so when we look at this as well, inside this for loop, just like we discussed about with any loop, right, one of the things that we can do is we can check the heading to see if it's of a certain type. So I can add, for example, something else here, and I could say like, say if heading equals another heading. Maybe I want to add an actual number to that, right? So I can document dot query selector main dot inner HTML, basically do the same thing that we're doing here. Plus equals, except in this case, right, we can just right here before the less than symbol add the number. Make it 2. Right, which is pretty cool. Right, so if we were to save that, give it a little save and see it. Hope I need to put that in an else before I need to put this part in an else before we do anything. Forgot that. And it's heading, not header. Silly mistakes this afternoon. And now if we look at that, we see the number 2 there. Right, exactly where we would expect it to be in our demonstration here. Right, one of the interesting things is if we look at our page source, we don't see any of this code in there, right? Like there's no HTML in here at all. We actually have to look at our inspect element tool to be able to see the code that's being generated by our JavaScript. And so here we can have our heading H1, another heading 3. And so another thing that we could do is maybe we don't know where the heading, another heading, is in our array. We know it's in there somewhere, but we don't know where it is, and we want to put the number that it would be in order. Well, we can do something else here, right? And so maybe what we would also want to do is add this value even if we don't know where it is. And so for that, we can actually use the index of. All right, so let me just put this in here as a little console log. Console.log. Our headings dot index of heading. Right, so this is going to tell us the index location of the heading that is the text another heading. Right, so if we save that and we look at it, right, and we look in our console, we see we get the value here of 1. Right, we can zoom in and we see we have the value here of 1. Ignore this error here because that's for a plugin that I have that doesn't work on this site. So we get the number returned back of 1, and we know, even though that's number 2 in our array, we know from last week when we started looking at arrays that we start counting arrays at 0. So if I want to find, if I want to use this number as the number, I can do that. I would just have to add 1 to the value, right? So we start counting at 1. So in this case here, what I might want to do is concatenate an empty space into here, right? So I have a space between the name of the heading and the number. And then kind of do the thing that we were doing there. I'm going to put these in parentheses just to separate them. Add another plus sign here. And we'll write our headings dot index of heading. And then we'll add the value 1 to that. Right, and so we'll save. Right, and then it ends up at number 2. Right, so regardless of how many we have there, or regardless of how many items we have in our array there, it's always going to have that number beside it. And so we see we're only doing that when, thanks to our conditional here, when the heading that's being iterated over is another heading. Now, if we were to look at this as, say, some rules, right? Like, let's say we have a list of rules or a list of headings or a list of whatever, right, that didn't have any numerical values in it. So let's change this again quickly. And we'll have heading, another thing, and something else. And let's say I wanted to number all these things, right? And so they're headings, so I can't exactly use a list for that, right? Because I'm going to put a paragraph between each of these, right? I might have another array of paragraphs that I want to put in between all of these. So we can use that same trick that we just saw there to just put numbers before our heading title here, right? So if we said for heading of array headings, document.query selector main .inner HTML equals an H1. So we're going to put that in quotes. H1. That's our opening H1 tag. we are going to concatenate that with the value of our headings. I'll put these in parentheses to be more specific. Our headings dot index of heading plus 1, and concatenate that with maybe something like a period space. Concatenate that with the value of the heading, and concatenate that with our closing H1 tag. Right, so now we're able to dynamically generate all of these headings on our page. And it's our headings and not our heading. And another mistake I made, that should be plus equals instead of just equals, because just equals overwrites, plus equals appends. And so now if we save that and we look at our site, we have one heading, another thing, something else. And so along with this, we could put another constant of our paragraphs, and we could set that equal to, we can make 3 paragraphs. So we'll just call these for the time being paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3. And we can kind of picture this as being from what do I want to say? Like an API or like an external data source or like a predefined array of data that we've already set up. Right, and so from here, I can actually use this to my advantage. I have this array of paragraphs, so I can also create a paragraph for this. And we can say, okay, well, in addition to this, right, we can document .query selector main again. We could also add this to the same line, although it's getting a little bit long, so we'll just put on a new line with a new bit of code, plus equals our p tag. And in this case, we're going to use the index of the current heading element as the index location of our paragraph element. So we get the relating heading and paragraphs, right? So we can concatenate that with our paragraphs. At index location, our headings dot index of heading. And so when we do that, the corresponding paragraph in the corresponding index location shows up underneath the headings that we dynamically generated here. And so one of the things that I like to do with this is use arrays for quiz questions, or to make a quiz question. Because I can dynamically create correct answers based on index location, or I can give it some other sort of value that lets my program know that, oh, this is the right one. Another thing that we could do, and I'm trying to think of use cases kind of on the fly here. You know what? Let's just go for the quiz question here. Why not? That sounds like a fun one. In fact, I'll create another const s equals document dot create element section document dot body dot append child s s dot style dot background dash or background color equals hashtag CCC. And we'll go into our CSS here and we'll create a section min height equals, let's say, 10 viewport height. And this is CSS, so I'm not equaling, I'm colon. And let's aspect ratio 1:1. And yeah. And we want to make sure we save both files. And I want to lower the width on that. Width will be like 20 viewport. Right, so we can just have ourselves a little gray square on our box here. Or gray box on our website. Whatever. So now let's create a new function. Let create question. And let's see what we can do with it. We'll do an arrow notation function here. And we'll create an array. We'll call it const answers. And we'll set that to answer 1, answer 2, answer 3, and answer 4. Right, so we can document dot query selector section dot inner HTML plus equals this is the quiz question. What? Right, just to have a little demo of a question there. So let's actually call this function, and we'll call this function at the bottom so we can see it populate that. So that's document dot query or add event listener. We're going to do that on DOM content loaded, and we're going to run create question. Throw semicolons on the end of here for compliant code. And now we have a little quiz question here. And so we already have our answers, and so we can add our answers into the document. So let's say for each of these questions, or each of these answers, right, we're going to have a right answer. So let's say, let's let the right answer equal answers dot index of answer 3. Right, and so we know that that will put 2 in there as the value of the right answer. 0, 1, 2, right? Because answer 3 is the third item in that question. And so if we did a little for answer of answers, document.query selector section dot inner HTML plus equals. We're going to create the input. So it's input type equals radio, value equals and this would be quote. So we'll put single quotes here since I use double quotes around radio. Value would equal document dot index of and or not document answers dot index of answer name can equal Q answers and I need a label for that. So label would be concatenate the value inside answer. And we put that in quotes. And then let's add a break here so we can break all our answers apart. And we end up with this. Answer 1, answer 2, answer 3, answer 4. Right, so we have our question and we have our answer. And we can click and oops, I set up the checkboxes wrong. Or the radio button's wrong. Let's see, the name has to be the same. It was just that the name had to be the same. Or do I have to put them in a form? Might be what I need to do. No, the name just has to. All right, now I put the name Q answers there. Let's check on it in the code. Oh, I see what I did. I think there's some issue in here somewhere, maybe with how we are. Answers.index up. Answer name equals Q answers. That is strange. It looks like there's an issue. Input type equals radio value work. But what's not working is this. So let's switch these around. And let's escape these. I want to escape that. I want to escape that. And I'll do the same thing here. I'll do that. I'll escape that. I'll escape that. I'll do that. 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 Now let's see. Is that better? What am I missing here? There's something going wrong that I am overlooking. Oh, that's what it is. I actually need quotes around this, I believe. So escape, quote, boom. How's that? That's better. That's what we want. So now when I select the answers, we have our dynamically generated text boxes. And so we know that the correct answer is the answer with the index of 3. So, or with the same index as answer choice 3. Right? And so since we used the value of the checkbox as the index location of the radio of the answer as the value of the radio button. There, I got there. Took me a minute, but I got there. Then we can know that one is the correct answer. So we can say something like, let's see here. Let's add a button. So document.query selector section .inner HTML plus equals button ID equals submit answer. Or actually, it's an ID, so it should just be submit. And then submit answer. And then backslash button. Now we have a button here. And so we should be able to attach an event listener to this button. So something like document.query select or document.query selector. Hashtag submit. And remember, we have to do these in the right order. If we don't do these, if we don't put this one after this one, then the button won't be created yet when it goes to add the event listener to the button. So it won't know what to do. Add event listener. Click. And then some sort of function. Right? And we could actually put our function in here. Or we could do some other function, some other pass off. All right, so let me think about just for a second how I want to handle this here. For the time being, let's just run this other function here, right? Let's run a let show answer function, arrow notation function, and we would just alert document dot query selector let's see here. We want to be able to select the checked radio button. So I need to query selector input colon checked. And I'd want to get even more specific with it, and I would say input name equals what did we name that bad boy? Few answers. Input name equals that few answers colon checked. Dot value. Right, it seems like it doesn't like some stuff here, so we'll see what the deal is here in a moment. Definitely doesn't like it. We need to add the show answer function here. So let's do that. Now let's find out what it doesn't like here. Because again, I am kind of just coming up with the demo off the top of my head. I am missing a says I am missing a parenthesis somewhere. Calls out line 36. There's the alert parenthesis. Input. Definitely not. This should definitely be in quote. I bet that's the issue we're having. All right. There it is. Good, good, good. So now if I click this and click this, and it's not. Let's see. What's our problem? So not read properties of no reading add event listener. That could be I called that button. I gave that button the ID of submit. Let's just change it to button. See what that does for me. How do I want to do that? That's what I get for flying off. That is what I get for flying off with a half-baked demo idea today. Hmm. So I know this is an order of operations question here. I'm having trouble thinking through it at the moment, which is never fun, right? So I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to bail. I think I'm going to bail out today and just let that be it. This might be a good challenge for you all, right? As you're looking over this to try to figure out what I did wrong, right? Because I'm definitely not perfect by any means, especially when I'm just trying to show some demos to expand what we already know based on the video from last week. So again, I suggest that you go back and review the video from last week. We got some good stuff here where we used some arrays to do some different things. We were definitely on the right track here. My memory is just not so good right now in terms of trying to remember how I do this, even though I've done this dozens of times. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here. We're getting pretty well long enough anyway. So with that being said, if you have any questions, send me an email, let me know. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.